Next up, Senator Adam Hinds. So again, to give your kind of quick intro, Zayda, Ortiz, and I are our wonderful tag team interviewers. Kind of this afternoon, we'll be trading off with questions. It'll be a kind of a 15-minute block, so keep that in mind as kind of you think about the kind of length of different answers. But to start us off, can you just take a couple minutes, tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're running?
Okay, great. Thanks to both of you, and thanks to everyone. I gotta say, we're a year after the insurrection in Washington. It's heartening to have all of you taking time out of your Saturday to make sure the infrastructure of democracy is in place. And so thank you for participating and doing your part. You know, very quickly, I'm currently a state senator for 52 municipalities in Massachusetts. I'm running for lieutenant governor because I firmly believe we are at a unique moment, a time when we've seen so much exposed about our greatest weaknesses. Certainly a lot of strengths in terms of people coming together, but between COVID-19, our ongoing racial awakening, the economic downturn, they've revealed so much about what not just needs fixing, but simply what needs to be changed. And so it's a rare moment when we're seeing that, people are acting on it, and we actually have the money and the resources to do something and make progress. And so more of the status quo is not what it calls for. And if we do not make progress at this moment on addressing inequities and disparate outcomes by income, by race, by neighborhood and geography, then we will have failed. And that's what got me in the race. And it's going to take not only visionary leadership, but folks with a background and bringing people together. Real quickly, I grew up in a small town in Western Mass, saw the shifts in the economy impact my own family. My dad left a tool manufacturing company to take on his own retraining at the age of 50 and became a teacher. And that just kind of, you have that perspective of we're dealing with a legacy of problems in our economy related to stifled mobility and wage stagnation, high housing costs and beyond. After grad school, I went to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. After grad school, I joined the Kerry campaign to try to get W out of office. That didn't work. So I joined the UN for 10 years and was involved in conflict negotiations in Iraq, eventually a territorial dispute between the Kurds and the rest of the country. 2 years in Jerusalem as a regional advisor to the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process. And then finally on Syria, working with Kofi Annan on a ceasefire and then removing Syria's chemical weapons program. But I wanted to get involved in issues back at home. And so I came and moved to Berkshire County at that point and led two nonprofits, one related to guys getting involved in violence, and then another one focused on mental health. So, you know, I brought all that with me into the state Senate and into this race. The race is going well. We've rolled out a couple dozen endorsements, Senators Gomez and Sear and Comerford and Rep. Sabadosa and a range from across the Commonwealth. And so that's been a great start. I'll just maybe close with this, another personal point. You know, I just became a father 8 months ago. And when you're a parent, it brings more and more urgency to this fight, right? You're fighting climate change with the urgency of now, but so that my son can actually just kind of live, fighting so this generation can experience social and justice and racial justice differently. And in fact, my son Rafael is part of the migration story. My wife Alicia is Mexican-American, and her grandfather came to the US, drove trucks his whole life so that his family could find opportunity. And my wife is now a professor and just knocks it out of the park every day. And yet that intergenerational mobility is almost unheard of today, according to the data. And so that's you know, what I'm here or why I joined the race, to kind of restore that sense of opportunity, to fight hard for it. I believe I'm the progressive who can win. And so I'm excited to get to know you all in the coming months and do this work together on the other side of this campaign.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I am a local organizer in Malden, Massachusetts, and during COVID-19, my attention really got down to the local level, helping organize a mutual aid group. And so the COVID-19 response and the crisis that we're still in is near and dear to my heart. So my first question is, how would you evaluate the state's response to COVID-19? And what would you have done differently? And how can you ensure that the next time something like this happens, we are better prepared?
I love the question. The state's response has been late. It's often only moved when forced by either the federal government or by public pressure to actually take actions. There was a failure out of the gates to understand how dramatically different our health outcomes are and would be by income, by race, by neighborhood and geography. And so we got a glimpse right out of the gate. You'll remember standards of care proved to be racist in outcome, right? Denying care to folks with comorbidities, and overlooking the fact that people of color have higher rates of comorbidities and would then therefore be moved down the list for treatment. It was the first of a series of very serious missteps. And so there you go, as a starting point. I think, what would you do differently? We're in the middle of kind of these head slapping moments. Like, why have we not learned that we haven't even had the fundamentals in place for testing, for PPE, for vaccines, when we knew there was going to be a winter surge, we knew there was going to be a post-holiday surge, and we weren't prepared. And so even now it feels like we're kind of tiptoeing forward when we should be sprinting when it comes to, the governor said, oh, we'll put forward $10 million for 2 million tests. Why are we not doing 5 times that? And that's why the legislature is stepping in. And so that's been important. So, but there you go. Those are some of the elements in terms of shifting our public health systems, recognizing that there are disparate outcomes by income, race, and geography, and doing something about it, and then putting those fundamentals in place moving forward related to testing, PPE, vaccines, and making sure we have community level approaches so that that each of those are being impacted by neighborhood that are disproportionately impacted.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. And then to drill into the office of the LG itself, we have 2 parts. One, how would you describe the office of the Lieutenant Governor to voters, especially how the office can be used to advance progressive policies in the Commonwealth? And then to zoom in on one role of the office in particular, the Lieutenant Governor chairs the Governor's Council, and then although often overlooked, the Governor's Council plays an important role in judicial confirmations, parole board confirmations, and pardons and commutations. And what priorities and perspectives would you bring to this part of the job?
Maybe I'll start with that one. I view it as an opportunity to have an active hand as an ex officio member in criminal justice reform. Mm-hmm. And you're right that it's judicial appointments, pardons, and commutations. And so those judicial appointments are critical for true judicial or criminal justice reform. And so I would, in my vision of how we can reshape the judiciary, that means moving towards a system that is focused on addressing underlying factors contributing to crime or the reasons why folks are maybe coming into a courtroom, encouraging and moving towards restorative justice, community-based programming. The first nonprofit in Berkshire County that I started after the UN was, like I said, for high-risk youth getting involved in violence. And you see pretty darn quickly that we weren't dealing with the actions of one kid. It was often, a legacy of racist institutions and income inequality concentrated in certain neighborhoods in the city. And why were we not focusing on that rather than trying to put kids behind bars? And so that was the motivation of the program, and that's what I see as being more, being a critical part of how you can work with the judiciary. And in a larger sense, for me, I think the lieutenant governor's role, I'm excited about the opportunity to reimagine it because, that's kind of where the definition of the role stops is the governor's council. And I view it as being able to push the governor's agenda, but in particular, I would want to be a convener and really mobilize the full strength of the executive branch. An example I've been giving lately is I filed a bill to create an office of racial equity. It's my view that this is an amazing opportunity to say every secretariat, so every member of the cabinet, you have to convene with the lieutenant governor on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis. What are you doing to address kind of racial inequities in your area of control, be it healthcare, and I've just mentioned some, or education, or choices in transportation, either the kind of the legacies of infrastructure locations and environmental justice implications, or otherwise, and housing. What are you doing to overcome the legacy of redlining and disparate home ownership by race? I think that is what's pretty darn exciting about the role. But you've got to put someone in there who can do it and who has a history of doing that. And so that's pretty exciting. Finally, I would just say what I've liked about lieutenant governors who I've met is that everyone in town has their cell phone number. So I think that's another great role, is cutting the red tape in the executive branch. And I'd give you all my cell phone and you can call and text. And I think that's an interesting and important function.
Thank you. Kind of a little softball question. Who are your political role models and why?
Interesting. I mean, obviously, when it comes to just the big picture nationally, I'd have to say like Elizabeth Warren, someone who's just never been afraid to speak truth to power, never been afraid to scream from the mountaintops. And oh, by the way, putting forward good policy proposals and being rational in doing so. And I think for me, I'm often asked the question, hey, you spent all that time working on conflict reduction, and now you're in a political position in a contentious moment, contentious being a nice word. How are you bringing people together to get things done? And it is often saying, look, here's why I'm progressive. Here's why I'm promoting a progressive policy. It's based on X, Y, and Z, fairness, equal opportunity, and here's why we need to take these steps. And I feel like that's an approach that she's taken, and it's really appealed to me.
Great. I definitely have probably a number of fans of hers in the room. So building on that in a way, what governors or lieutenant governors, either in Massachusetts past or in other states, do you admire and why? And what would you seek to emulate about them, or which policy ideas of theirs would you want to introduce or build upon?
Lieutenant governors in other countries. I guess, or in other states. I haven't thought about that. I guess I have to do some research on lieutenant governors in other states, but
you could do governors in other states, or even in
Africa. You could do governors. I mean, I only remember bad lieutenant governors, so.
I love it. Great, so governors. Look, geez, man, oh man, I don't know. I'm hesitating because for everyone that I'm coming up with in my head, I have a couple of reasons why not to support them. But
you can highlight on the good things and acknowledge the bad.
all right. What jumped into my head is Gavin Newsom kind of leading when he was a mayor on LGBTQ issues and rights long before other folks, and so that's always stood out at me.
That is a valid answer. Name one word that people who work with you would describe you, and name one word that people who work for you would describe you as.
One word, not one sentence, huh? Okay.
We're trying to keep it brief. We're trying to keep it moving.
Yeah, I got you. Convener, I guess. It might be one. I think what I'm trying to get at in one word is, someone who's determined to go after the big issues and underlying inequities. That was not one word.
Can you
Close enough. If I said a sentence, like most politicians, if I sent a sentence, you'd say a paragraph. So
in my mind, there was a hyphen in between each of those, so it's kind of a word.
Sure, compound words. We love them. So we've all been spending far too much time at home during the pandemic. So what has been your favorite binge watch that you've discovered during COVID times?
Oh boy, I definitely spend a lot of time on Game of Thrones. Ted Lasso recently just kind of got, I thought that was interesting. Didn't see it coming, spending a lot of time on mental health issues and especially with athletes. So that's been an interesting turn of Ted Lasso. That's not a spoiler, is it? No. That was interesting.
Oh my God, I haven't seen it yet. Perfect. And just to kind of wrap it up, kind of also, after talking to a voter, how would you want them to describe you to others?
Okay, maybe I'll go back to my one-word answer. I just think that it's, a loving warrior that's determined to go after the big issues, someone who's focused on inequities and using this moment to take on disparities by income, race, and geography, and bringing people together in the process.
Awesome. And then before we close, if somebody wants to learn more about you and your campaign, where should they go?
For now, we have a website, adamhinds.org, that I'll throw in the chat, and we can go from there. Of course, I have Twitter accounts and the like.
And what's to drop that in the chat as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Yes, we always like to follow Twitter handles, new Twitter handles to
Yeah.
follow.
Thanks again to all of you, and for everything that Progressive Mass is doing in the political ecosphere in terms of just keeping everyone's, putting forward a strong agenda and keeping everyone accountable. So it's great.
Awesome.
Lots of love for that.
Thank you again for joining us. Can I get a round?